So Nova's been waiting for the mini set, been waiting for mercenaries, and well, I'm gonna go try and grab her to play some Hearthstone. It's not that bad right now. So Nova, you wanna come play some Hearthstone? You can play some like quest decks, or play like a combo deck, or, you know, control decks. They're around, right? You just wanna go hide. Well, maybe she'll come out when the mini set and mercenaries comes out, but anyways, let's go talk about the news.
Let's get salty!
Hey everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hearthstone, the 58th edition of our weekly news recap series, where we take a look at all the news and events in the Hearthstone world the past weekend. Well, we're gonna kind of have like a mini This Week in Hearthstone, but we have a pretty big story to cover this week, so we'll talk about our top story first, which will be Thijs gets relegated, and basically there's an outcry to fix this basically broken esports program. We'll also go over the GM results for week 7, which determined everybody that got relegated qualifying for next week's playoffs, as well as we'll have the mailbag segment where I'll answer your questions. So first, we have Thijs getting relegated. Thijs is one of the most famous Hearthstone players of all time. He's one of just the best people in the community, passionate, positive. I tweeted this out, just send love to Thijs if you haven't already. Sending him support for all he's done. But basically what happened is he got relegated from Grandmasters, meaning if you look at this standings table for EU, he did not finish high enough to stay in the Grandmaster system, and next season or whatever, he will not be able to participate unless he was to requalify. However, Thijs tweeted out that he was not going to try and continue a competitive career. He's basically done. He'll focus on streaming, content creation. He's not quitting Hearthstone or anything, but competitive Hearthstone he is no longer going to pursue, and this has been a very common trend for a lot of Grandmasters that get relegated. But even this season, we've seen a record number of Grandmasters just outright quit or retire before the season was even over. Like we've had like Eddie surrender this week, announced that he's no longer going to be Grandmaster. I think there's like five or six Grandmasters that before the season even ended said regardless of whether they're going to get relegated or not, they're done. They're done. And this is not good for a competitive system. This is actually terrible that players willingly just want to walk away. The common trait for most of them, if you read their twit longers, by the way, I'll have Surrender's twit longer below. I've already, and prior This Week in Hearthstone's, had everybody else's, if you want to check those out. But basically the common trend for most of them, not all of them, but most of them, is they lose their passion. It's nothing they want to continue doing. They don't get to play with their, like a big part of becoming a Grandmaster is like playing with their friends. The Grandmaster system basically alienated almost everybody outside of the select 48 players that are Grandmasters in the system. Everybody else, you don't matter in the competitive scene. There's no second circuit, there's nothing. You're kind of irrelevant. And so yeah, people get burnt out, they're not rewarded. The switch to YouTube is really demoralizing for a lot of people. If you look here, this was the numbers I grabbed on Sunday for the final day with relegations on the line on NA. That's the kind of viewership we're seeing. Less than 2,000 viewers. Like it's insanely bad when on Twitch they were pulling like 10, 20, 30,000 on average, and it's dropped to the point where unless they're giving away packs, people just won't tune in. So that's demoralizing. There's no exposure from these events, and also the prize pool's less. They cut the prize pool by half this year. It's just been a downward trend, a downward spiral, and people just don't seem to be invested. A lot of pro players don't even bother trying to qualify anymore. And yeah, it's just rough. It's a rough system. It's a broken system. It's just bad. And we've seen tweets by like Frodan. He talked about how basically sad it is to see these people like leaving and basically not wanting to pursue their dreams anymore. Kibler tweeted this out saying it's really telling how many Grandmasters retirement and relegation posts talk about how they lost their passion for competing when it felt like something they had to do, and how they didn't enjoy it as much as many of their friends who weren't in GM quit. I was actually consulted for my input on both Grandmasters and I guess the Magic Pro League. And one of my biggest concerns for both was that they meant for people outside the system. Turns out exclusion, so many of those people also negatively impacted the drive of those inside the system. So basically, ever since Grandmasters has been put into place a few years ago, it's done nothing but harm the game in terms of its esports. You could argue it harms the game as a whole because its exposure is less, and the system just people don't care anymore. People don't care, and it's sad. Hearthstone esports used to be a lot of fun. People got really invested. I remember the World Championships, there'd be hype. Now people barely talk about it. If I asked you in the comments to name the prior world champion, I would be surprised if a lot of you would remember or know, because it was so just whatever. I mean, I remember when the World Championships happened last year, they basically didn't even advertise it. It just happened. By the way, it was Glory who won the World Championship, so it was Glory, and congrats to him. But yeah, it's bleak, and I don't think there's any way of salvaging this without a major overhaul. And there is talks. One of the representatives from HS Esports did say they have changes planned for next year. They can't talk about them, but I think Abar and some other people have been in the works of plans, so hopefully there's some future. But right now, people are just saddened, they're frustrated, and it's just, when you have Aveline tweet this, it's sad, because Aveline's someone who's grinded competitive ladder a ton, and it's just like, just delete GM, get rid of it. And my kind of proposition I've been saying for years, for literally like the last year and a half, is to get back on Twitch, which I know they can't because they're in a YouTube contract, so that blows. But get rid of this Grandmaster system. It's just bad. The exclusionary part is bad. How hard it is to get into it is bad. And then when you get relegated, you feel like you can't get back into it unless you're the very odd few. Bunny Hopper and a couple others have actually got back after relegating, but they're far and few between. It's basically retirement. We've seen people like Firebat outright leave the game. We saw Dog leave the game. Like, so many people that were in the system just leave on their own. And I'm sad to see what the system is turning to. And yeah, I would try and get back on Twitch. You can't do that. I would make go back to more of an HCT style back in the day, where you could qualify for spring, winter, summer playoffs. Anybody could theoretically make world championships. It was a lot more enjoyable. People could come together. You never knew who was going to show up, what streamer could go there. And it's just a lot more fun than seeing the same 16 people compete every week that, by the way, you have no idea who they are, because they still don't do interviews. They still don't, because of Blitzchung's Free Hong Kong incident. They still don't do it, even though now Blitzchung has been relegated and retired. They probably still won't do interviews because they're that afraid of, I guess, anybody possibly speaking their mind for 1 second from the company, that every voice matters. It's crazy that they don't even publicize their GMs. And the only one that seems to be getting any notoriety from it is Gabby, because he's so like animated in his in the webcam. Like, that's the only way you ever see personality from a player or get to know them at all, is through their webcams now, because you're not even allowed to speak. There's no interviews. It's ridiculous. So I would change the system that you can have more people get in. I would interview players. I would let their personalities be shown. There's some pretty awesome people in Grandmasters. You just would never know it unless you like watch their stream or follow them on Twitter or something like that. It sucks. And the last thing I'd say is have Battlegrounds Grandmasters, have Wild Grandmasters, have a whole circuit for all your game modes. Mercenaries Grandmasters, maybe, if that's viable. It would just get a lot more excitement. And but it required investment, it would require work, and it doesn't seem like the HS Esports thing is that interested in doing it. You say they're going to do changes, so that's kind of my spiel. I'm going to keep going on about it, but it's just dying a death, and it's sad to see. And there's so many things that could be changed, that could be helped. It just doesn't seem to happen. Next, we have this week's Grandmaster results, which had the playoffs set up and relegations all determined. Start of the Americas region, where we saw Final Four of Eddie, Dmitry Kazov, Killing All Day, and Fled, with Dmitry making the finals, making the playoffs, and Killing All Day winning the entire week, avoiding relegation. And as you can see on the NA standings, 1 through 8 make the playoffs, so Monsanto all the way down to McBanterface qualify for playoffs starting next week to qualify for World Championships, with Rami, Eddie, Ego Waffle, and Kills Luna all relegating and having to work their way back to GM, or if they decide like Eddie, just to retire. On EU, we saw Final Four of Psycho, Felkeen, Casey, and Gabby, with Gabby taking home yet another championship. It ended the way it started on EU, and as you can see on the EU standings, Gabby qualifies as the top seed for playoffs all the way down to RDU. And the 4 players relegating on EU is Thijs, Floki, Warma, and Boston. In the Asia Pacific region, we saw Alan, Possessi, Alotemu, and Glory all make the Final Four, with Alan winning yet another week. And as you can see on the APAC standings, we have Possessi all the way through Shaxier qualifying for playoffs, with Chiansu, Tracion, Dawn, and Blitzchung all relegating. And as mentioned before, Blitzchung is retiring. So those are the final results before the playoffs start next week, where there will be drops for a couple packs. So at least tune in to get your free packs next week. And lastly, we have the mailbag segment, where I answer your questions. If you want to leave me a question, leave a comment in the comment below with mailbag in the comment. So first, Captain Mofo asked, do you think they would ever make Whizbang available for standard? I mean, it would make perfect sense. It would be awesome because just why is it in Wild? It doesn't really make any sense, but that would mean it would have to be in the core set. That means they would give you a bunch of free decks, which means it probably won't happen. And I've seen no reason or no hinting of it happening, but a lot of people would love it. It'd be great, but I would be absolutely shocked to see it ever happen. We have Greg Jewell asking, do you think a Wild mode with a few rotating sets similar to Arena would be a good addition to the game? I do. I think it would have a niche appeal similar to Classic, maybe Duels, because it'd be very paywalled, and with the expansions changing up all the time, it'd be very expensive to maintain. I've seen Ixar talk about it on AMAs, that it's something they kind of are interested in doing, but again, feels like it'd be kind of hard for players to keep up with, and they're not exactly, I think, to give free Wild sets out for it. So in theory, I think it'd be cool, but in practice, probably wouldn't be super popular. It'd be, again, very niche. For someone like me, a whale would be great, but they don't seem to cater too much to that these days anyways. Tony the Hawk asks, what's my favorite card art? And there's too many cards to possibly go over, so I'll go with my favorite card art, or at least golden card art of the latest expansion, and that's the Rat King, Golden Rat King. I just think it looks sweet. It just looks amazing, and I love having a golden, and I'm sad he's not that good still, even with the buffs, but maybe he'll be relevant soon. But I'll go with the Rat King, at least from this expansion. And lastly, Sabino Gustavo Horongo Payola, I probably butchered it, but I gave it a shot, asked, hello, do you think it's time to introduce another class like Monk or Death Knight? If you remember them introducing Demon Hunter, it was an absolute nightmare. It was terrible. It's horrible. But now I kind of like the class. It's pretty cool. But the game is so unbalanced, such a mess. Let's give it a couple of years before they introduce a new class. I mean, the client doesn't even work. I think maybe in like a couple of years I'd be down for it, but not right now. And from what I've heard in like AMAs and stuff, there's no plan for at least a year or two for a new class to be entered in the game. So that's this week in Hearthstone. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Have a great day and stay salty, my friends.